Welcome to the Priority Lane podcast, the show where we learn how to work smarter, not faster. I'm your host, and today we're joined by Dean Weinbring. Dean is an executive director at ASX-listed fund manager, Pengana Capital Group. He also spent the last 4 years as managing executive of Pengana's emerging online fixed-term account platform, Term Plus, which has seen explosive growth in the Australian market since opening to the public just on 2 years ago. Between Pengana and Term Plus, the group covers 16 different investment funds spanning both listed and private markets around the world, with more in the works. Dean also sits on the steering committee for a charitable fund called the Aura Fund. Oh, and top of that, he also has 4 children, all boys. So, needless to say, he's a busy man. In today's conversation, we chat about Dean's background in organisational psychology and his interest in the application of behavioural psychology to drive enhanced engagement and customer experiences, specifically within the financial services, fintech and investment sectors. So, Dean, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Nigel. Great to be here, and thanks for having me.
No problems at all. Look, now, but before we start, 4 boys. How's that working out for you?
Sorry, we'll say that again?
How's that working out? Keeping you busy?
There's never a dull moment. There's a lot of overstimulation in our household, but a lot of good life lessons coming from it as well. But yeah, needless to say, we have a lot of fun.
That's the main thing. And what's the age spread? Are they all young, or they've got a range?
So my eldest is turning 14 on Monday. And my youngest is 3 years old. So we really get the full age bracket experience, if you will.
And how's the inter-sibling relationships? They're not killing each other?
As long as they're not killing each other, we're doing well. We've had a couple trips to the emergency room. They do know us there a little bit, but not from things their brothers do to them, just from extracurricular activities.
Well, it all leads to bonding and great memories they'll have for the rest of their lives.
100%.
Now, just the Aura Fund, that was mentioned in the intro. Can I just quickly ask what that gets involved with?
Sure. So the Aura Fund is a really interesting concept that we came up with nearly 8 years ago now, I think. And essentially what it is, it's a fund of funds where the portfolio is managed by a group of underlying fund managers, all in, mostly fund managers that you would know, highly regarded fund managers with good track records in listed equities. The difference is that where you would typically invest with a fund manager who would charge you a fee for managing your funds, the underlying fund managers that work with the Aura Fund donate 100% of their fees back into Aura. And then 100% of the fees charged at the Aura Fund level get donated to charities. So to date, we've generated over $3.5 million in donations, and that continues to grow, supporting some really incredible charities and supported by some great fund managers and even better investors.
Oh, fantastic. That's great. Well, keep up the good work with that. That sounds incredible. Now, when I learned about your background, I noticed it was a bit circuitous, so should we say it's not the normal road traveled by people looking for a career in finance. Can you just go through a bit of your background, because it is quite fascinating?
Sure. So I guess like most people, I had no idea what I wanted to do when I grew up. And so without a direct path of, this is what I want to become, I guess my father's first rule for me before I did anything after school is that I had to go straight to university and get a degree. It didn't matter what, I just needed to come home with that piece of paper. I ended up throughout my university studies, working towards that piece of paper, finishing with a double major in organizational psychology and industrial sociology. A total mouthful to say, but luckily enough, I actually found the content quite interesting. And ultimately, it led me down a path of discovering the concepts of behavioral psychology, which is where I really found an interest. So related, but not directly what I studied. And so after university, I founded a promotions and marketing agency. This was a long time ago. So in the days when MySpace was still at the leading edge of the internet, Facebook was just starting to come on the radar of early social media adopters. And
Right.
really, the approach that we took was we used some of those behavioral principles to create cross-platform experiences for big brands at a range of real-world entertainment events and music festivals and music concerts and the likes. And then using those real-world activities to then drive online traffic for amplified brand engagement. Um, Quite common today, probably a little bit more high tech back in those times. And we ended up building a massive database for those days, and a really strong brand as well. I still come across people who are a lot older demographic nowadays than obviously what we target back then, who still remember the company and the experience we built. So
Oh,
I guess
wow.
that's quite rewarding. But over time, with the rise of social media platforms, mobile phones now having personal use cameras,
Mhm.
and then the rise of user generated content that exploded off the back of that, and I guess also being a young dad, I decided it was time for, let's call it a big boy career change, and I got the opportunity to join a life insurance group with a really great bunch of people. I spent about 6 years there, eventually moving into a risk advisor role where I had built up and was managing a pretty decent sized book of my own clients, as well as general management across that business. Um, Life insurance was a really interesting one. It was obviously a big change from marketing, but from a sales perspective, I found it really easy for me. I think it was really easy because I had absolute conviction for the importance of having proper life insurance in place. And
Mhm.
especially at that time of my life when a lot of the people I knew were having babies and starting families, I guess the product market fit was just right at that time. And I think that's actually a really good sales insight in general. The job of selling becomes a lot easier if you have a great product and you are absolutely happy to stand behind it. Then
Yeah, yeah.
in 2017, Pengana Capital Group, where I am today, acquired another funds management business and inherited a big customer base of direct investors, which was a new frontier for the group at the time, because up until that point, Pengana's customers were traditionally financial advisors and high net worth investors.
Right.
And so at the time when that happened, I was in a really interesting point in my career where I had both a marketing background, direct to consumer marketing background, as well as a finance background. And so I joined the group in a communications and distribution role at the time, which was really the start of a big transformation for the business where we are today, where we have a large direct customer base and we've democratized a number of unique investment sectors for the broader direct investor market that we service. And that continues to expand at the moment.
Okay. Okay. So just back to your promotions and marketing business that you established. Was the motivation for that based on using the behavioral sciences that you learned, or was it more the opportunity of emerging market and industry?
Um, I think the behavioral side definitely helped. So
Mhm.
straight after uni, I actually landed my first big boy job in finance, in an investment banking and funds management type role.
Right.
Obviously, I was really young at the time, and in that role, the thought of sitting in an office in a single room in a building for the rest of my working life was just not that attractive to me for some reason. And so I definitely had an entrepreneurial itch where I wanted to be building and creating something rather than what I was doing at the time, which was the facilitation of companies that other people had built. So
Yeah.
when I saw this business idea and that it could actually have some legs, um, you know, possibly ignorantly, I went out, raised some capital, didn't quite know what I was doing, but managed to get something off the ground and got to building from there.
Okay, great. And so with that business, are there lessons you learned during that time? that you still carry with you today?
Um, I think I probably learned a lot of what feels obvious to me today.
Hmm.
A couple things come to mind. One, people and customers are generally quite inward focused. The hyper personalization of user experience does make a difference to customer engagement. Uh, I learned a lot at the time because what we were doing, cross platform with online and offline about online behavior and funnel structuring from the early days of the internet.
Hmm.
Um, I think the team that you work with makes all the difference. Um, I learned that managing people is actually a really hard part of any business that is generally underestimated.
Yeah.
And finally, probably the importance of getting your revenue model right and the diversification of revenue streams is really important. And so, the importance of diversification doesn't just apply to investing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the whole behavioral sciences, organizational psychology, I haven't studied it, but it's intriguing. I find it very interesting, but I must admit I wasn't completely across industrial sociology, so I googled it to get a definition. And the definition I found is industrial sociology is the study of work, labor markets, and workplace behavior within the context of society, examining how industrial processes shape social relations and in situations. Now, when I read that, I kept thinking of, I don't know if you ever read George Orwell's 1984 Big Brother type stuff, but I'm thinking, wow, that reminds me so much of that. Um, do you think there's any, how do you think Orwell would be looking at today's workplace? Would he be thinking, okay, so I got it right. Big Brother is here. People are being monitored.
I think you probably would, but that might be a little bit self-serving, and I would give that to you with a caveat. On the whole Big Brother side, yes, it's easy to make an argument that people are more surveillanced and we're more tracked with productivity metrics. Even now with the introduction of AI analysis, more so than ever before. But I think a key difference is that it's all opt in through the employment contract. And so people can essentially opt out at any time, which is quite a bit different to, a widely enforced Big Brother system.
Yeah,
And the truth is that humans are naturally conforming creatures of habit. We're very adaptable. And so you can be as cynical as you like about that, but where there's a system or an organization or even an industry that's building in a general direction, the people on board are naturally going to conform within that system. And especially when there are incentives to do so. So
yeah.
people have the choice on where they want to go. It's not totalitarianism, as Orwell would have put it. I think it's more a market driven optimization that sometimes converges on similar mechanisms to what he was at least speaking about.
Well, I guess the study itself is to move towards an ideal scenario, not towards a Orwellian scenario.
Sure.
So what's the difference? I don't want to get too technical, but what's the difference between industrial sociology and organizational psychology?
So I think probably the key difference is the lens that you put on it. So industrial sociology, you could say, is the macro lens. So that focuses on how workplaces are shaped by broader social systems,
Hmm.
um, institutions, economic structures, labor markets, etc. Organizational psychology, then you could say, is the micro lens, which focuses on individual and group behavior inside organizations, things like
Right. Okay.
motivation, performance, leadership, and decision making. So, where industrial sociology explains the system that people work in, organizational psychology explains how people behave within it.
Within that,
And
okay.
then the part where, I find really interesting is the behavioral psychology part, which actually looks at the behavior of the individual within that system. So, I guess kind of three levels, and each one somewhat interlinked, but very different.
Okay. Okay. So what do you, on the sociology side of things, well, have you seen any great shake-up, say, over the last 20 years of, on sociology?
Um, Over 20 years, absolutely. I think, 20 years is even a broader time frame than we need to look at.
Yeah.
I think, the gig economy was one major shift. All of a sudden, millions of people are technically independent. So whether through platforms like Airtasker or even Uber, even the whole social media influencer, idea that's come out, more and more people are able to create independent income streams for themselves, which kind of removes them from the group or societal piece. Obviously, COVID was exceptionally interesting as far as social experiments go in hindsight, and I think it over delivered in expectations. So,
Mhm.
the way to think about it, or the way I look at it, is pre-COVID, all industries blindly conformed to the manufacturing model of the Industrial Revolution. So, the idea that everybody has to be under one roof as if they're working on a production line, regardless of
Yeah.
what sort of product they're manufacturing. Then when COVID hit, all of a sudden, entire workforces became geographically dispersed. And in many places, certainly we found it here at Pengana, not only was there no break in the pace of work, but in a lot of areas, productivity actually vastly improved. And I think that was such a pivotal change that happened so quickly and fundamentally changed so many things. Think about video meetings that you take from day to day compared to pre COVID. Even platforms like this podcast and the fact that we're having a discussion today um, over over a video call, and that podcasts are a thing that people listen to. That was hugely boosted by the change in social dynamics that happened over COVID. Um, and then, from an emerging perspective, one area that is really interesting, of course, is AI. Even with the disruptions caused by COVID, now that some time has passed, we seem to have somewhat, a reversion to the mean, if you will. We may have less in-person meetings, but work from home flexibility is higher than ever. But I'm still in the office today. I still do have face-to-face meetings. People have very much settled into a new normal that's not too far off where it was before. um, I think COVID's going to fundamentally change so much at the foundational level. And what's going to be fascinating to watch is the quick and profound wave of impact that it's going to have over entire industries over the next few years.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, talking about my own business. We do a lot of video conferencing because there's three sitting in Melbourne. I've got two in Singapore, one in Sri Lanka, one in the UAE, and one in London. Uh, so face-to-face meetings don't, well, very rarely you can. How have you found you mentioned an uptick in productivity. What about in collaboration, in the throwing around of ideas? Has that been impacted at all?
Well, I mean, I think I'll throw that back to you. You mentioned how widely dispersed your team is today. What did it look like pre-COVID? Was that fathomable for you to have a team so spread around the world?
Probably not, actually. And look, it came basically it came about due to after COVID. I travelled a bit more and then found great people in different locations, and I employed more on the skill rather than on the location. And maybe that was because of the post-COVID era where everything is done over, Zoom or whatever.
Absolutely. And so what it does is it broadens your universe for where you can find skill from. And so there's always trade-offs in everything. But even the fact that you're now able to hire on skill rather than just geography means that the people in your team are naturally going to be contributing more or at greater levels because you've managed to find the best people available with less constraints.
Well, yeah, yeah, and look, it opens up the whole lot. Like the latest person that I brought on board is in the UK, Lawrence. Now, I worked with Lawrence back in the late '90s, mid to late '90s, and I knew his skill set, and I thought, yeah, I really want this guy on board. Where maybe 10, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have even thought about it because he's on the other side of the world. But now, a simple pick up the phone. Hi, Lawrence. How you going? Had a chat, bang, and he's now working for us. It just, yeah, your resource pool just expands.
And that's a an efficient behavioral shift that we've been through, not of our own design, but that was forced on us because of the how we had to react to, what happened during COVID. And
Yeah.
human behaviors just completely changed.
One comment, which is sort of where I was alluding to before about the collaboration, I read somewhere months ago that uh, collaboration over video meetings within a team sort of aren't as productive. And maybe that's because if they were in an office, they're comparing in an office around a table together compared to everybody in their own bedrooms. And the
Yeah.
what went along with that was that if people are at home, they're, with a Zoom meeting, it's kind of like, okay, I'll do this and then I'll get off as soon as I can, as opposed to hanging around and having a chat. Uh, yeah. Have you experienced that at all?
So look, I think it's contextual. Hanging around and having a chat is cultural rather than productive. Um, it depends on your team. It depends on what you do. So, if I think about how we use team meetings, if we're all around a table, we're going to be sitting having a discussion and something will come up and a response might be, yes, I'll check that when I'm back at my desk, or yes, I'll send that item to you or something along those lines. Whereas if we're on Teams and somebody asks about a document or a campaign or a folder, sure, let me bring that up and share it in real time.
Yeah.
Can you send
Yeah.
me that email? Sure, let me send it to you right now. Let me share my
Yeah.
screen and show you what I'm looking at. So, not to say that that's more productive. I think the collaboration is just different. How each team uses it will either be, better in person or better online. And you naturally learn to work within and around the limitations of both.
Yeah.
But I would
Yeah.
say that there's a time and place for both. If you need to get around a whiteboard and throw ideas around, is very different to if you need to actually get into execution mode, where it can be very helpful to have everybody at their devices.
Well, I guess what we've got now is basically more options
That's
instead
it.
of just working under one roof. There's plenty of options now.
Working under one roof, and again, not because it's better, but because that's how you've always done it. And so, without
Yeah.
questioning, is this the best way for us to do something? We always did that, and now, as you say, we have the ability to choose what's a better way to facilitate what we need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, there's been over the last, I think, 5, 6 years, a lot of talk about boundaries with employees in terms of 9 to 5, and the employer shouldn't contact people after that. Um, do you see that as an issue, or how is that managed in your environment?
Again, I think it depends on the team. So, like you, we have some team members dispersed around the world. That does mean different time zones, and so um, I think what changes, and again, it depends all on the working environment, is um, on the flip side to what you said, you're not necessarily now constrained to, I have to be at my desk from 9 to 5, right?
Right.
And that's when I have to do my work, and that's how I do it. We have some staff, or generally our approach is, it's not about the hours. You're not going to get extra points for sitting at your desk at 6 p.m. at night and, oh, look at that person, they're working late. It's much more outcomes based and output based.
Yeah.
So, are you getting the work done? Are you delivering? If me personally, I am a night owl. I've always operated like that. And so, very often, come Sunday night, get the kids to bed, I'll get 3, 4 hours of work done. I start my Monday morning, I'm 4 hours ahead of where I need to
Yeah.
be, um, because I work better that way. And so I think people have flexibility to, you know, again, all circumstantial, but there is
Mhm.
potential for better work-life balance.
Yeah, yeah. Because I just think well, with my own situation, uh, I'm quite happy that I'm in Australia because we basically kick off with my work team. I'm the first one in, but
Yep.
then a couple of hours later, Singapore comes online. Then an hour or so later, Sri Lanka comes online. Then another hour or so, we got UAE, and then when I'm about to head off home, UK wakes up. So I'm just, and then
And
yeah,
then
obviously
and then
UK
while you're
goes.
sleeping, UK is getting their work done, and you can wake up and get on top of it, and so there's almost no break in productivity.
Well, yeah, yeah, and initially, that was when we worked for a large client. This is going back 4 or 5 years ago. That was part of the strategy. They were based in the US, but had a lot of representation in the UK, Europe, and UAE. So it was trying to get that 24-hour day going to cover off a lot of bases. But one good thing now is, uh, with the UK guy, I wake up in the morning and check WhatsApp and to see what great news he's got for me for the day. And it just
Well,
gets
that's
the
it.
the day off to yeah, it gets off to a great start. Well, and
So the whole
off
the
to a
whole
poor
work
start if it's
dynamic
bad news.
changes there because you're not all operating only within a set number of hours. The way that you work together also changes.
Yes, yeah, yeah. And so and what you said about passing the baton from time zone to time zone. So we can be working on a project, each doing their own part, almost 24 hours a day.
I guess that comes back to answering your question about if it's still productive to do things
Yeah,
online, right?
yeah, yeah. Now, with behavioral psychology, can you think of any like normal life examples of witnessing behavioral psychology? If you had to say, okay, here's a few examples of great psychology or behavioral psychology.
Uh, I mean, that is literally the definition of behavioral psychology. So, um, the way I think about behavioral psychology is uh, it points out things that are unobviously obvious. So things that are, universally human, but probably
Mhm.
rarely acknowledged. Often when I read books, or if you just look at, behavioral biases and things like that, generally you're going to read something or learn about one and be like, well, yeah, that's pretty obvious, right? Like I get it. Um,
Yeah.
there's some great books and great talkers and stuff to that. So I mean, maybe if it helps, I can call out some common examples that will give you idea
Yep.
of how they apply to everyday humans.
Yeah.
Um,
Great.
one, so I mean, maybe three kind of examples will give you a good breadth. So one is something called the endowment effect, which essentially shows that we value something more just because we own it. Um, I can tell you if we're walking in the Westfields and one of my kids picks up a free balloon that's worth nothing and they didn't have a minute before, and another kid wants that balloon, that's their balloon. Like I'm not giving this thing up. I'm going to guard it with my life. But the reality is, 30 seconds ago, you never had that balloon that didn't mean to you, but now that you've got it, all of a sudden it means a lot more, right?
Right.
We see it in investing. Often if somebody owns a stock that's kind of out of favor and it's in their portfolio, you get that sentiment of, well, would you buy it today? No, I wouldn't, but I won't sell it either because I own it. And so I've attached this endowment effect, this ownership value on it. Um, and so we do find through that bias that ownership does generally distort judgment. Another interesting one that's kind of related is the idea of loss aversion. And the general principle of loss aversion is that people will feel loss about 2 times stronger. They'll feel the pain of loss about 2 times stronger than they feel the joy of gain. Um,
Oh,
an
really? Okay.
exa- so I can give you two examples there, right? Uh, you've got $50, you put it in your pocket and you say, all right, I'm going out for the day. I'll use this for lunch and a coffee. You go to the coffee shop, you put your hand in your pocket, your $50 is gone. It's fallen out. You've lost $50. you're probably going to be agonizing it over the afternoon. Where did that go?
Hmm.
Oh, it's $50. I only needed 10 of it for my sandwich, you know, versus if you were walking down the street, you find $50. Oh, cool. $50, right? Oh, that's great. I'm going to go, get myself something, whatever, right? You're going to feel the joy, but that pain of, I had the $50 and I've lost it. Um, you're going to feel that generally a lot more because you worked hard for that $50 that you lost, but you came by the $50 pretty easily. Um, e- Again, think of it in investing. If you have an investment that makes a 15% gain, it's cool. Like of course you're going to enjoy that. You're going to feel pretty good about it. But if you have that same investment make a 15% loss, you're probably going to lose a little bit more sleep over it and a little bit more
Yeah.
pain than the joy you felt, off that gain. And so loss aversion as a behavior has quite a profound effect on people and their decision making. And you can consider the fact that avoiding pain often drives more decisions than actually seeking reward. Um, and maybe the final one, and this is one that is kind of less common, but I just find it really interesting, is the relativity principle, which essentially highlights how our judgment is based on relativity rather than pure
Hmm.
logic. So, another way of saying that is that people don't evaluate things in absolute terms, only relative to a data set that's available to them. So, an example of that would be a $5 coffee. A $5 coffee feels expensive until you're in a coffee shop that charges $6 for a coffee. Then all of a
Right.
sudden it's kind of less expensive. It's the same as a premium option on a product only exists because there's a worse option next to it. If there wasn't that worse option, then the premium option would just be the normal option. And so what we see out of that is that value isn't really judged in isolation. It's very much judged through comparison. If again, I mean, I guess I've called out comparisons to investing, so I'll do it with this one. But a 10% per annum return, is that a good return? It depends. You would really consider it in isolation. So you're more likely to judge if that's good or bad based on the benchmark that you're comparing it to. A 10% return is not a great return if the benchmark did 15%. It's a
Yeah.
fantastic return if the benchmark only did 5%. And so,
Yep.
I think things really change when you consider the fact that people make decisions using relativity rather than in isolation.
So is it sort of like perception is reality?
Perception is absolutely reality. Everything is relative.
Mm. That's interesting. And with your with the loss aversion you were speaking about, where you feel pain more if you lost $50 than if you found $50, is that because people think of the opportunity cost? Geez, I could have spent that $50 doing A, B, and C.
So
Now I'm going to miss out.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff that comes down to mental accounting as well.
Right.
I mean, there's an anecdote I can think of. It's a fairly long one. I'll try shorten it. But if you book tickets to a concert, um, and you know that concert is worth $100 to you, right? If you go to that concert and you lose your ticket on the way, it's going to be very hard for you to pay another $100, having just spent $100 on that ticket. Your
Yeah.
mental accountant is going to say to you, do I really want to spend $200 going to this concert?
Yeah.
If that $100 was $100 that you'd lost that fallen out of your pocket the day before, and so you haven't attached the value to the concert ticket, it's not going to stop you from going to the concert and spending $100 on the ticket because it's still worth $100. And so a lot of it is just, mental accounting is hugely uh, prevalent in the way that people think and make decisions as well. There's a great book by an author, Dan Ariely, who's, I mean, his stuff is just excellent, called Dollars and Cents,
Right.
SENSE. And,
Yeah.
he talks a lot about, um, how cognitive bias distorts the way that people perceive money and how that often
Mhm.
leads to irrational financial decisions.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, I love that analogy. That's great. Um, Now you're a bit of an all round, as we've discussed. Well, I think you are anyway. What have we got? We've got sociology, human behaviour, psychology, organisational design, fintech, finance, operation. What would you
No,
say is your main
I'm either
passion?
an all rounder or I'm a bit all over the place. Who knows?
It's all perception. Um,
That's it.
would you say your if you had to say what your one passion was, if you had to narrow it, would it be more on the finance side? Would it be more on the psychology? What end of the spectrum do you find yourself at home?
Um, whether it's limited to one of those two, I think if I look back on my career to date, in some way, shape, or form, I've always been involved in building and implementation. And
Hmm.
so, building things can be bloody hard, but it can also be extremely rewarding. And I've been fortunate enough that I've always found myself involved in projects that deliver genuine value to people. If you're just flogging a product for the sake of earning a living, you got to do what you got to do. But if you're working to deliver real value to people's lives, then that's really rewarding.
Yeah,
And I think for me, I've always had an interest in behavioral psychology, unrelated to what I studied, but definitely came out of that. And finance just happens to be the sector where I've managed to find a way to really apply some of those principles to deliver what I believe are great outcomes for people.
yeah. I guess it makes sense, doesn't it? You're in a sector, but you've got all these tools that you can use in that sector.
Yeah, and look, the finance industry can often be quite vanilla and bland. By natural, I guess effects of most of the people that end up in finance are very much, quite technical, numbers based, generally, less creative types. Not
Yeah,
not passing judgment at all, but just a general observation.
yeah. Now we're gonna finish up just with a little look back in history. What we do is just have a look back at what's happened in the month that we're in, which happens to be April. So today we're just going to have a bit of a look at the origins of April Fool's Day. So, Dean, did you know that while the origins of April Fool's is unknown, one of the biggest theories is that it started when France changed from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian calendar, which made the start of the year January 1 instead of late March. According to legends, those who forgot to change the new year and continued celebrating the new year in late March and early April were called the April Fools. The earliest mention of April Fools is in a 1561 Flemish poem by Edward de Dene about a servant realizing that he had been sent on a fool's errand on April the 1st. Now, the question is, have you ever been the victim of or a perpetrator of an April Fool's prank?
Um, I'm sure I have, um, but I think probably in more recent times it's my kids playing the April Fool's jokes.
Oh, playing
Uh,
them on you? Or you playing them on
Yeah,
them?
well, I mean, playing them on anybody really. This year was a quite an interesting one. I think being a family with four kids may be easy for them to pull off, but my second son, being one of the middle children, lives up to the mischievous nature that's expected of him. Was on a call early morning with one of his friends and somehow had the idea to tell her that his mum was once again pregnant. And so, mum was sleeping at the time. He was up early morning and woke up to a whole bunch of messages from that child uh, and a bunch of other people questioning if she was in fact really pregnant again. She didn't know what was going on, and so I guess it was somewhat of an April Fool's prank on us too. But yeah, that's April Fools, and let's just say it stops there.
I remember, sixth class. So what, we're 11, 12. The teacher came in April 1. And to start the class, she goes, well, have you heard the news? And we're just sitting there, going, what news? Um, yeah, New Zealand was going to join Australia. And, we're all shocked going, what? And then all these questions, how's it going to work? And I forget exactly what she was saying, but there was going to be a big downside for us for some reason. I forget what it was.
Yeah.
And everyone's getting worried and going, well, how's the cricket team going to work? Are they all going to play for us now? And went on. And then finally, it was about, I don't know, about an hour later, someone dawned to go, hang on, is this April Fool's? So that was a good one.
I was hoping you were going to tell me she told you all had to learn the haka and started.
She should have done.
In hindsight.
Yes. Dean, look, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Thank you very much. I remember when I reached out to you, I read about your background and I thought, wow, this is, I'd love this guy to come on the podcast. I think it's going to be very interesting. And look, I'm so happy that you did come on. I'm sure the listeners are going to love this. So Dean, again, thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me. It was great to chat.
Great, thank you. And that's it for this week's episode of the Priority Lane podcast. Make sure you tune in next week where I think Lawrence is having someone on next week. Thank you and have a good day.
This episode is sponsored by My Brokers app, a white label app built specifically for financial advisors and wealth management professionals. If you want to know how you can have your own app exclusively for your business and your clients up and running by this time next week, visit mybrokers.app or download the free My Brokers demo app from your favorite app store.